It's pretty good so far. It's the Colt 6000, the book that comes before that in the trilogy of books. That was actually like a big inspiration for how I wrote the story of the Y. Um, and the Bloods are Rover. I haven't read American Tabloid yet, but the Colt 6000 was about the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. The Bloods of Rover is kind of the fallout from that. It's kind of the FBI engaging in a COINTELPRO against the Black Panthers, um, sort of them playing both sides against each other with the Ku Klux Klan. Um, this sort of plot to funnel money into casinos in the Dominican Republic. It's pretty complicated, but it does have his like signature uh, telegraphic sentences, intense, some pretty intense action scenes. It opens with a really great, intense heist scene, um, and it has some outrageous stuff. It like there's a section where one of the main characters was like a corrupt FBI agent, goes to the headquarters of a guy who distributes hate literature. He discovers that the guy is Jewish, very Jewish, in fact, that he's just doing this for money. And his wall is covered in various civil rights figures being murdered in the styles of various artists. James Ellroy tends to throw a lot of like really out there things like that in his books.
Elroy is a noir author, right? Like a real
Yeah,
gumshoe detective type.
yeah. His most famous book is probably L.A. Confidential
Hmm.
or the Black Dahlia. Those are his uh, most famous books. Which I have both of those on my shelves, but I haven't read it yet. I actually think my favorite I've read from him is White Jazz.
White jazz.
Yeah, that's about a detective who's a police detective trying to investigate a breaking and entering during the heat of the Rampart scandal, and it's written in a very stream of consciousness way. Like it takes his style to like the absolute extreme. Main character talks like this, no superfluous words at all. I'm trying to like imitate it, but can't come up with a way to do it.
Very matter of fact.
Yeah,
Almost like corn fed on Duckman.
like that. Yes. Very.
You know, you kind of sound like corn fed, actually. Uh,
Move on to next book. Need to get to best lists. Yeah, kind of like that.
oh, go
Um,
go.
okay,
I'm
so
planning to be here long after you guys sign out. I don't know how long I'll go, but go ahead.
yeah, my first pick for number 10 is My Birth and Other Regrets by Ben Fitz. Disclaimer: it was published by Nihilism Revised, who also published a book by me, and it was sent to me to do a blurb for it. But I think it's a very strong debut book. It's a collection of stories. It's a good mix of horror, bizarro, and uh, magic realism. It kind of reminds me of Tony Rausch in his style. This is sort of
Oh, I
a
love Tony Roush's work.
yeah. He
Hey,
has
I'm going
a
to leave you two for a second. I got to go take my dog out.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah, he has a
come back
very
though.
Oh,
yeah. He's a very whimsical style in a lot of his work, but I guess he's a bit more horror bent. Hey, hello.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
there we
here.
go.
I hear you. I'm
Sorry, I
listening.
thought. Sorry, usually the way it changes surprised me. I thought everyone disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a there's a good section. There's a good story in there where um, someone who is I can't remember if he's either dying or going into a coma, and they use virtual reality to kind of occupy his mind while he's either dying or in a coma. And he, I guess, what they had read, he wanted, they misinterpret what he read, what he wanted to have his brain go into. He wanted his brain to go into like a concert of his favorite death metal band, but instead they put him inside an album of his favorite death metal band. So he's basically stuck in this VR world, being murdered and tortured in the various ways the death metal bands described in their lyrics.
Oh no!
I thought that was a really great one. There's a funny one in there. I think it's called like the Soft Boy Machine or something like that, where a folk group is tired of going to punk shows and getting booed off stage. So one of them invents a machine that turns all the punks in the audience into these soft boy hipsters. That's a pretty fun one. And there's one in there about a half human, half clownfish, which is kind of a whimsical kind of story.
That's what I was waiting for you to get to. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a bit, it's definitely. I think that's probably like the most Tony Rausch's of all of the stories. But I think it is a really great it's a really great debut. I hadn't read any of Ben Fitz before because he released all of his work in like these limited edition zines. But this book is a pretty great collection, and I highly recommend it.
Only $1.99 for Kindle.
Yep, only $7.
Nihilism Revised is doing some good stuff lately.
Yeah, so buy that, and along with my book and other Nihilism Revised books.
Does he have a website? Is there a way to make sure that he gets a bigger cut than Amazon?
If you buy it by I think his Twitter is there it is, Doomgoat666. That's like his username on everything. So if you contact him, is probably a way you can get it directly from him, or you can order his zines as well. So yeah, Ben Fitz, I think he's got a lot of potential, and his debut is really great. So that's number 10 on my. You
can purchase it on Etsy too, and that probably gives him a bigger cut of it, doesn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Etsy is for artists, so. Okay.
So, that's number 10. Number 9 is Grow Up by Ben Brooks. This is one I've had for a while now. It is a guy who came from the alt-lit scene. He was one that I guess you would say made it, and ended up being published by Penguin. Grow Up is a coming-of-age story about a kid named Jasper who's he's kind of an idiot. He thinks he's like mostly worried about trying to sleep with girls who don't actually like him. He's thinks that his stepdad is a murderer, and he's constantly trying to find evidence that he murdered his ex-wife. He's trying to write a novel, and comes up with ridiculous shit for it, like imagining a rape scene where a woman takes off her shoes to reveal deformed feet to try to get the rapist to go away.
Oh, it only makes him screw even harder, right?
So actually something like that, something about how the rapist there's actually something that happens where the rapist actually likes it, so she gets into it, and
come on, that was obvious.
And he it's basically just following this dumb kid for over 200 pages, but it's actually really funny and entertaining. I definitely highly recommend it. That's if you like, it is definitely like an alt-lit kind of book, but if you like that, I think this is definitely one of the stronger books from that movement. Let's see. And number 8 on my list, we were talking about this guy earlier, God of the Razor by Joe R. Lansdale. This one is technically a collection. It mostly consists of the Night Runners, which was one of his early books, and it also collects the other stories that have the God of the Razor character in it. The Night Runners is a really good novel. It's really intense. Really, it's basically everything I like about Lansdale. The other collected stories in there are also really great. There's a short story about a house that actually drains the life from other houses, which is a really cool idea. There's and the God of the Razor character himself is a pretty intense character. That's a illustration of him there on the front. And one thing you can't see on the bottom is the fact that his shoes are he wears heads for shoes. It's his feet shoved into a pair of severed heads' mouths, which
I
is
see the heads down here on his belt, but I don't see his shoes.
Yeah, that's not in there. Plus, it has some really great illustrations to go with the novel and the stories. So I do think that's a. I don't know if I'd recommend that as like an entryway into Lansdale. I'd say it's more of a completionist kind of thing, especially since it's out of print. But I definitely recommend the Night Runners. I think that's still in print. Let's see. So, yeah, that's number 8 on my list. Number 7 is In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. Most people probably know Ryu Murakami from his book Audition and from the movie. And to be honest, I actually think the movie version of Audition is better. The book is, I don't want to say it's bad, but I kind of talked about this before. There's like some kind of cultural white noise going on with it. You kind of feel like he's parodying something that's common in Japan that's really not common over here. And as a result, it doesn't really work in translation. But In the Miso Soup is about a guy who's like he's a tour guide for foreigners, but he's a tour guide for the lurid parts of Japan. Like he helps foreigners find things like massage parlors, prostitutes, sex clubs, things like that. And the main character of the book, he meets this guy named Frank, who's kind of an awkward American, and he kind of suspects something is going on with him, especially when reports start coming out that there's been a string of murders in Tokyo. And I won't spoil the later half, but there is like one scene where this is something of a spoiler, but there's a scene where Frank actually does kill a bunch of people in a nightclub, and it's kind of difficult to buy he actually does it that way, but it's written in such a way where it kind of implies that the main character is kind of half imagining it. But the whole theme of the book is about alienation, not just being a foreigner in a foreign country, but the fact that Frank was kind of an outcast in America. And Ryu Murakami actually writes small town America in a way that feels very truthful. I'm not sure if he actually spent time in small town America to write this, but that's actually the version that I got. That one with the rainbow face. Yeah, that's actually the version that I read. It's a interesting cover. But yeah, I definitely think that's better than Audition. I think it's it very deftly describes what being alienated is like, even if certain parts of it are a little hard to buy. But I think it comes up with some great vivid imagery, and I definitely highly recommend it. Let's see.
I'm back now.
Okay.
We're
here, number 6, right? Is that where you're at? Okay.
Number 6 on my list is Writings of the Vienna Actionists, which is sort of a compilation. What that is Vienna Actionism was a movement in, well, Vienna, which was
Is this it? Is this the
yeah,
one?
that's the one right there. It was a art movement, which is kind of it's it it was based entirely on performance art. The idea was that, among other things, they wanted to create works that would be temporary, that couldn't be commodified. It focuses on Bruss, Mule, Hermann Nitsch, and Rudolf Schwarzkogler. It has a bunch of photographs and a bunch of their writings for their what they call their actions. Um, it it was a very odd movement, and it got them arrested for various reasons. Like Hermann Nitsch's works were sort of meant to kind of resemble, I guess, pagan rituals. So it involved a lot of unsimulated sex, body parts from slaughtered lambs being thrown around, things like that. They, of course, were very focused on the body, things that go in and things that come out of the body. So a lot of their actions involve things like pissing and shitting and having sex. It's definitely it was a very lurid movement, but it was very groundbreaking, and a lot of shock artists that are around now, you kind of get the feeling that they're a pale imitation of the Vienna Actionists.
And this movement is no longer around. Did I
Um,
understand that right?
Yeah, I think I can't remember if it was Bruss or Mule was actually arrested at one point because he started a cult and he molested a bunch of kids, so he was in jail. Hermann Nitsch, I think, is the only one that's still around doing what he does. He's also a composer now. Rudolf Schwarzkogler is one of the more interesting ones. He actually didn't perform, unlike the others, he did not perform very often in public. He would give private performances. He would and he would, document them all in photos. He his work, unlike the other ones who were very spontaneous and often, deviated from the plans, he was like very strict about following the plans that he wrote out. And he was also, unlike the others, he was very focused on color and imagery that wasn't necessarily body related. Like some of the ideas he came up with was injecting a bunch of eggs with dye, and then people would come in and break the eggs on a canvas, things like that.
That actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah,
It's interactive. So he was anti-improvisation, right?
yeah, he was very strict about following his plans, and he died very mysteriously as well. There were rumors that he had cut his own penis off during a performance, which was actually not true. He did have a performance where he simulated castration, but he didn't actually do that. He was found dead at the bottom of the window of his apartment, and nobody knows to this day whether he was pushed or whether he jumped or whether it was an accident. And another thing is the way he lived in his life. Like the other ones were very bohemian, very one of them lived in a commune, things like that. Whereas Rudolf Schwarzkogler kind of kept a regular day job and lived in an apartment in the city and things like that.
Did this occur in France or America?
Vienna.
That's France, right?
That's Germany.
Okay. During what time period?
I'd say it was during the 60s and 70s.
Germany was still heavily sanctioned and in a rebuilding period, right? It had only been 20 years since the war, right?
Yeah. So there was they weren't explicitly political in any way, like not their performances at least, that like most of them were either anarchists or communists, but they didn't really like mention World War II or anything like that. They
I'm just
did
trying to
that kind of.
imagine if there might have been any, like characters who would have been opposed specifically to this actionist movement.
Well, they were arrested multiple times for obscenity, blasphemy, things like that. They were not well liked, especially even like among like critics. They were not well liked. A lot of them thought what they were doing was obscene garbage, because at the time most like art critics were still pretty conservative.
Well, also there was a lot of artistic censorship during the Third Reich, and they even had like quality art assessors or evaluators who would determine whether an artist's work, was a detriment to German society, or if it helped, and if it was considered to be detrimental, then they were not to be exhibited in any public setting, really. So
yeah, there's definitely no way they would have come about during Nazi Germany. They would have very quickly been labeled as Antwerp Kunst. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but degenerate art.
And so if there were factions still, latching on to those ideas 20 or 30 years later, then it could have been someone like that killed your Schwarzkogler.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Schwarzkogler was definitely like the most introverted of the bunch, so there's way less of his of things that are known about him personally. But ironically, he had more writings, because because like I said, he was very strict about writing what he called scores for his actions that he would follow very closely. And actually, a lot of what this book was an inspiration for an upcoming book that I'm planning on publishing, where I have a bunch of texts in there that are heavily inspired by this one. Let's see. So, I definitely would recommend. Like I said, there's a lot of pissing and shitting and fucking, but I would recommend going to the website UberWeb and looking up some of the actionists on there, because there are a few movies of their actions that are up, and they're pretty fascinating.
There's a lot of shitting in all German art. Like I noticed in a lot of their cinema, and no, not just porn, but their cinema has a lot of it, and apparently their literature too. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. That's Writing of the Vienna Actionists. That was let's see, number 6. So number 5 is Star by Yukio Mishima. This is a new translation of not a new one, the first translation of this novella by Yukio Mishima. It's about an actor who is very famous. He stars in this book. He's starring in a Yakuza film, and it's based on Yukio Mishima's own experience being a star in a Yakuza film.
This guy killed himself. I remember that much.
The story. Well, he had a society that he called the Shield Society, which was basically a right-wing militant group, and they tried to take over a military base, but and he tried to get the soldiers to overthrow the government to return to the emperor. None of the soldiers listened to them, and they all jeered at him. So after he gave his speech, he committed harikiri seppuku.
Mm-hmm. Ritualistic self evisceration.
Yep, he cut his belly open. In this book, the main character Rico, he's a pretty famous actor. He takes a lot of pride in being good looking and appearing as being a star, like there's a section in the book where a bunch of his friends throw a birthday party for him, and he doesn't show up to it, not because he has other things to do, but because he wants to create the perception that he's too busy to come. He's not in any relationships. He pretends to be like in relationships with other movie stars and models and so forth, but he's actually sleeping with his personal assistant, who's kind of this plain Jane woman who's older than him. And there's a section in the book where an obsessed fan actually barges onto a scene he's filming, and the director agrees to put her in the film, but she keeps blowing her lines, so she immediately goes into a dressing room and overdoses. And later, when he's talking with this personal assistant, she just spends the whole time making fun of the woman. And the one obsession that runs through a lot of Yukio Mishima's work is the fear of getting old and decaying. There's a part where he meets toward the end where he meets an older movie star and realizes that someday he's going to get old. He's not going to be young and handsome, and it like frightens him to his core. There's a lot going on in the book. It's a very short book. It's not even 100 pages, and I don't know if I'd recommend it to someone who hasn't read Yukio Mishima before. I'd probably recommend something like Spring Snow as like an entry point, or The Sailor Who Fell from Grace from the Sea. But
that actually was a Hollywood movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it became one. Yeah.
Yeah, they Americanized it and actually stars Chris Christopherson, I think. But I haven't seen that, but I do think that the book is really good. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace from the Sea. So that's a star by Yukio Mishima. He's had a few new translations come out this year. I also have The Frolic of the Beast, but I haven't read that yet. And there's another one that I want to get. Again, I can't remember what that one's called. Confessions of a Mask. I have that on my shelf. That's a good one. Let's see. Okay. So number 4 on my list is Apparitions of the Living by John Treyfry. This is a difficult book to describe. Let's see. So the basic story of it is the kidnapping and murdering of a young boy. It opens with a very in-depth description of the kidnapping, or of the boy's dead body in the desert. But the first chapter follows basically a random guy who sees it, goes to a motel nearby, and ends up having to live there in order to pay off his staying there. The second part is where the initial kidnapper meets the kidnapped boy's mother, and they try to find the boy, but instead of actually looking for the boy, they end up kidnapping another boy to be his replacement. It's a book that's not really focused so much on storytelling. It's very based on the idea of the new novel. It's that Rob Grillet laid out. It's more focused on atmosphere, on the things around it, on the setting, things like that. The way it's broken up is it's in 3 parts. Well, no, it's in 5 parts. The 3 parts are the narrative, while as the 2 parts between each part of the narrative is a sort of vague, poetic kind of writing, which has full of imagery still relating to the narrative, but not directly related to it. It's like I said, it's a difficult book to describe. It's a book that's more about atmosphere and so forth than it is about the story. And it's also laid out very strangely. Like the main narrative chapters, it's a pretty big book, but the main narrative chapters, the story is like in this narrow column right in the middle, while the break chapters are stretched out with a lot of space between it. So it's also a very formalist kind of book.
So you mean like paragraphs are like kind of islands off by themselves, kind of? Is that what you mean? Or
Yeah, kind of like that.
maybe that's the impression he was trying to create.
Yeah. The way I described it in my review of it is it's almost like the book was composed like a symphony with the three main parts and having two bridges in it. I don't know what much else to say about it. It's one of those kind of books you kind of have to read and experience in order to really get what it's about. But I do think it's a really great book. And I think that Inside the Castle, who published it, is doing some of the most like interesting work in regards to experimental fiction.
Mhm.
So let's see. That was number 4. Number 3 is Neon Dies at Dawn by Anderson Prunty.
Oh, it's great.
It's a great book. I do have to give a disclaimer that Anderson Prunty, who owns Adelaide Press, is publishing my my next book. But I do think this is actually read this before that happened, and it's a really great book. It's about a man who kidnaps the daughter of a local drug lord to get revenge for his own daughter being murdered by the drug lord. And there's a lot of focus on the decaying small town that he lives in Ohio. There's a lot of very disturbing imagery with how he tortures the drug lord's daughter. It's almost like the last book. It does have a very like straightforward noir story, but it's one you kind of have to experience to really get the full impact of it, because it's I almost want to say it reminds me a lot of Cormac McCarthy, actually, with how it with its sort of cynicism, with its with the way with the idea of longing for a sort of vague past, because you do see like there does seem to be a sort of inspiration from a vaporwave design in the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I see it, yeah.
And that's sort of appropriate for the book, because I can't remember, either the drug lord or one of the drug lord's associates are in a sort of funk band, the kind that would be like sampled by a vaporwave artist. But there's also this idea of a longing for this vague idealized past that kind of floats in there, and that's been degraded into nothing.
Honestly, I thought he had the wrong guy when he's in the club. Didn't you? I mean,
I didn't get that impression. I did kind of see that the guy.
I mean, at first, I thought at first he had the wrong guy.
Oh yes, I didn't really get that. I do like the drug dealer is this sort of this guy who's, as it tries to come up with this impression of being well liked even outside of his his profession, even though he's like a complete sociopath and like runs people over with his van for fun. It's a very heavy and depressing book, but it's a really great noir book, and I highly recommend it.
One word: mailbox.
Oh yeah, that section was and what he does after the mailbox part.
Mm-hmm.
That was that was pretty hard to read.
And his neighbor who calls him Hams Man. I guess she's like a slightly like slow, like alcoholic fat chick who's on disability, and because he gave her a can of Hams beer once, she calls him Hams Man.
Yeah.
He writes good like backward suburbia characters, you know.
Yeah, it's and that he really paints the decay of the neighborhood well. The like the fact that beggars just come up in the middle of the day and knock on his door to ask for money, and that drug carnival at the end. That's a kind of surreal and strange idea, but it's strangely I could picture that happening in one of those Idaho or those Ohio towns.
Hmm.
I could picture it happening in like some small Iowa town which is infested by meth. Um, so yeah, Neon Dies at Dawn. That's a really great one. Definitely pick that one up. Let's see. So number 2 is Stupid Baby by New Chiche.
I enjoyed that one quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's a autobiographical. It's about him, the time he spent living in a Cambodian apartment with a was it Cambodia or was it Thailand? I can't remember.
I think it was Thailand.
Yeah, in Thailand, where he's living with a prostitute, and it's each chapter starts with texts from 2 different people, one from the woman he was in a relationship with, and another who just has a lot of contempt for him. And it's tells the story of his his relationship with this woman. He goes into very excellent descriptions of this squalid apartment that he lives in. He describes his other encounters with prostitutes there. He even goes into like the first time he slept with one. New Juche prostitution is kind of his main theme. Let's see. And it's it was a very surprisingly kind of tender book because his first book, Mountainhead, it's he does have tender moments in that, but it's a very kind of detached kind of book, a very it's a very looking at himself kind of book with not a lot of like let's say like deep emotion. But in Stupid Baby, you kind of get the impression that he really did have very strong feelings for this woman he was with, and the like the ending where the woman he was with finally stops texting him, and it's just the abuse that he gets from this other woman at the beginning of the chapters toward the end is actually a very subtle but very heartbreaking moment. It is and Stupid Baby is it's basically a novelette. It is a it's only like something like 50 pages, and it was published by Amphetamine Sulfate, who do chapbooks exclusively. But yeah, I do think that this was I would recommend like starting with Mountainhead, but this was a really great novelette, and I really want to read more of New Juche's work.
Have you picked up The Devils yet?
I haven't yet, no. I really want to get that one. And I also want to get Bosun as well. Let's see.
Now, is he Cambodian himself, or is he just a visitor?
No. Yeah, he's Scottish, and he lives in Southeast Asia now, partially because of cheap prostitutes there, but that's what he writes about. He writes about his time in Cambodia, Thailand. I think he's also spent some time in Vietnam and Korea. He was originally a music project where he and the music project, the albums he put out were about it was called Whores of Leith, which Leith is a city in Scotland. But he eventually switched to writing, and I think he's one of the best writers working right now. And for my number 1 book of the year, it's actually a tie, so I'll talk about them both separately. The first one is Un-America by Cody Goodfellow. Un-America it's definitely Goodfellow's most ambitious book. Un-America is a secret city under under the desert in the southeast or the southwest, which everything there is free, but everyone there is basically a test subject. They're given food, drinks, drugs that are all potentially lethal, and the people that live there are felons, illegal immigrants, basically like the poor people, people who are in debtor's prison, basically like the dregs of American society. And the main character is a drug dealer who comes up with he finds a mushroom that actually lets people talk to God when they take it, and he's trying to sneak it in the United States, but he gets caught by Border Patrol and ends up in on America. And while he's down there, of course, he tries to test out, the drug, and he decides that he could start a revolution down there while he's being opposed by a fanatical priest who worships a machine god. It's very action packed. The characters in it are really great, very well constructed. From the main character, who's, I can't remember his name, but he's a great he's a great character. He's a mix between like a bungler and being greedy, but he's not like a complete idiot. He does a lot of good. He's a very well-rounded character, as is the character Jaime, who ends up becoming like the sidekick to this guy, and they have a very like frenemies kind of relationship. Of course, since psychedelics are a big part of it, he comes up with some great images of psychedelic trips. Like one of the more memorable moments is when he actually escapes on America and comes across and is in the tunnels underneath the southwest of the United States, and he comes across this traveling stage of perpetually dancing ravers. That was a really great moment. There's one character in there, a villain who actually has blackface tattooed on him because during a prison riot, a bunch of black prisoners who were angry about his racist remarks did that to him, but he likes it because he likes how intimidating it makes him look.
That would be painful, I would think, though. Your head, your entire head would be a massive wound.
Yeah, yeah. It's and that one of the funnier things he comes up with is a crime boss who wears a see-through suit that's filled with feces. There's just a lot going on. I haven't read a lot of Cody Goodfellow's work, but this is definitely the best. I think it's really great. It has a lot to say. It has great action scenes. It's really funny. I just think it's a great book all around, and I highly recommend it.
Now, he can be kind of wordy. Was that an impediment in this, or were you comfortable with it?
Not at all. I thought it would take me a while to read because it is 450 pages, and I thought it would be a heavy read, but I read it all in like 2 or 3 days. It's just that engaging.
Wow.
It's a really great book. Definitely pick up on America by Cody Goodfellow. And my other tie for number 1 is Girl Like a Bomb by Autumn Christian.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a girl named Bev who discovers that when she has sex with men, it causes the people she has sex with to basically be spiritually cleansed, basically. At the beginning, she ends up sleeping with this guy who's like a overweight kind of trailer trash kind of guy, but he ends up losing weight, getting a good job, becoming much nicer to people. There's a part in there where she's raped by a teacher, and the teacher, after he rapes her, realizes how ugly he is inside and commits suicide. And after that, she, gradually works her way up using her powers to help people, to help them become better people, even becoming a spiritual guru at some point. There's, but there are other parts where, people believe she's a symbol of what's wrong with America. It has like people trying to kill her. Uh, the prose in the book is really great. You'd think like with all the times she describes transcendence, that it would like get old or get boring, but she always comes up with a great vivid way to describe it. And I really don't know what else to say. I think it was I think it's just a really great book, really well written, a very insightful book. I definitely recommend it, and it was the book that I was reading during my grandpa's funeral, so it was a very comforting book at that point, which is probably biases me, but I still think even without that it's amazing. That's an amazing book. It's the only book I've read from Autumn Christian so far, but I'm definitely going to read more because I really love this one.
Yeah, definitely change that, because I think a lot of people who have read, her older stuff swear by Crooked God Machine, and it is pretty intense. This is her with an editor, right? Crooked God Machine, I think it was self-published, but I mean the ideas in it are just so off the wall. I mean, We Are Wormwood was also pretty badass. They're like fever dreams. Her older work, they're these surrealist fever dreams. There's nothing like I used to say she was too weird for Bizarro, and I think that still rings true.
Yeah, this one I don't know if it's definitely not weird in the traditional sense. It's I'd say it's very magic realist and very existentialist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the prose in it is great. I think I think the idea is great. Like it could very easily have been been dumb or preachy or just silly, but she works it very well.
Yeah, this was a departure for her. Like I said, her novels used to be a lot more fantastical, and there was more of a supernatural, presence. But so she really challenged herself to be more grounded in this one, I think. So yeah, she pulled it off. I liked the fact that without trying not to spoil too much, but I liked the fact that the main character actually went on and became a mother. Instead of just using her ability to have explosive sex, literally with just to be like a coyote ugly badass feminist chick. I like the fact that she actually became a mother and embraced that side of femininity.
Yeah, because I think the quest for personal fulfillment is a important part of the story, and I think she worked that in very well. I think she gave a very satisfying ending for Beverly.
It made a lot of sense, the path she finally chose. I mean, since she had done everything else, right?
Definitely.
I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah.
It's a book that I don't really think can be spoiled per se. To me, it's definitely a book that's more about the the journey than the story. It's very character driven.
Mm-hmm. And also, there is this one. She when you said the overweight guy, are you talking about the guitarist?
The guy that lives in the trailer at the beginning, like they actually have to have sex in the bathroom because his mother is there or something like that.
See, I remember that at one point she screws this guy, this heavy set guitarist guy, and what first attracted her to him, she says, is that the way he played a guitar and you know the way he emoted facially while playing that guitar, and when he became like attached to her later, you know, and said, "You're killing me, babe," you know, because she wouldn't, you know, respond to his advances the way he wanted her to, and she said that she was kind of less attracted to him because, you know, he wasn't as passionate like he was when he played that guitar like it was, you know, a living thing.
Yeah,
She's good at, my point is she's good at describing, like I can see that guy in my head, you know, those heavy set, you know, guitarist dudes with, you know, the goatees and whatnot. I mean,
yeah, that was definitely one of the more interesting conceits in the book, like the fact that Beverly, when she's young, is very into, I guess, bad boys. She does a good job of, you know, describing what about these guys appeals to Beverly, and she, you know, the sort of contradiction with actually sleeping with them makes them, you know, not bad boys anymore, and thus less desirable to her. I think the way she handles that conceit is very well.
and the fact that she did mature out of bad boys, and
Yeah, exactly.
and she finally found a real man who was, you know, emotionally and sexually mature enough to satisfy her, you know, that was very grown up, you know, take. I don't even consider this erotica. I mean, it has that aspect to it, but I mean, you know, I think it's a different kind of animal.
Definitely. I'd say it's erotica in the way that transcends just being wank off material and actually goes into being art, which is, this is a weird distinction that I make, but I tend to call erotica stuff like this, stuff that is focused around sex, but is more, you know, has higher aspirations than just being something you wank off to. And I just call like stories that you jerk off to, I just call those pornography.
Mm-hmm. Although you probably could rub one out to this. I mean,
yeah, she does have some pretty hot scenes in there. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, not you know, from personal, you know, experience.
So yeah, my number one book is a tie for. It's a tie between "Girl Like a Bomb" by Adam Christian and "Un-America" by Cody Goodfellow.
Yeah, I had a tough time of narrowing my own list down. I read a lot of good shit this year. Zach, you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do mine.
Cool.
I didn't put mine in any order. I've got, I think I've got 12 instead of 10. I guess the first one I'll start with is If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
But that's a great book.
Yeah, that holds the distinction of being one of the only, like, I guess you'd say, surrealist type books that actually, like, seriously really